Okay, so in this video I want to talk about a little bit of a dilemma that I've got going on at the moment. I've got three Amigas. My Amiga A500 Plus, my Amiga A600, which you can now see two of the keys have arrived. So I've got the minus and plus keys, they were missing previously. Still missing the escape key and the left alternate key. And of course my Amiga A1200. Now I'm going to start with the A1200 because that one is pretty much the most straightforward one to talk about really. So with the Amiga A1200 I can get an expansion card or an accelerator card that fits into the trapdoor slot on the Amiga 1200. Pretty much as simple as that. The problem is the price. Now I want something that's going to give me quite a good chunk of performance with this thing. And what I was looking at a few months back was the ACA 1233N, which seems like a pretty goddamn powerful accelerator card to be honest. But it's the price that puts me off because it's over £200. The other thing is as well, I would have to run this with the A500 power supply because again, the stock standard Amiga 1200 power supply is too weedy. When you start adding accelerators and things into there, it will cause stability issues. And yeah, I've heard all sorts of other stories about the machine turning itself off and random things if the power supply simply isn't coping and isn't pushing out enough power. So Amiga 1200, it's relatively straightforward, but it's costly. It's a couple £100 worth. 500 Plus on the other hand, it's a little bit more sort of tricky because these things can now be expanded more so than they were previously. So just to give a very small update to downwards what Amiga model to buy. The Amiga 500 and 500 Plus, there's the ACA 500 Plus that sits in the sidecard socket, which adds a really, really decent chunk of performance. And also sort of 8 megabytes of RAM. So the Amiga 500 Plus and 500, obviously you're still lacking the AGA chipset, so you wouldn't be able to run any AGA games on it. But that's an option, and is a very good option, I think, for expanding the Amiga 500 or 500 Plus. The other option, and this is where my dilemma comes in, really comes in, is the Vampire. The Vampire 500 Plus V2 or V2 Plus, whichever way around they've put it. I registered for my interest for the 500 V2 Plus all the way back in January when I bought this machine because, you know, I was confident that this would be back up and running again, fixed, and I'd get the Vampire 500 V2 Plus. Now, if you want to check out, there's tons of videos about the Vampire accelerators, the 500 and the 600 model, which I'll come on to in a second, and they are just off the scale when it comes to performance. You know, over 100 megahertz CPU, which is crazy. A ridiculous amount of a ridiculous amount of RAM in general, and AGA capabilities for non-AGA Amigas, which is awesome. Basically turns this into an awesome ultimate sort of Amiga machine that you can then run anything on. And obviously, yeah, with that I think you can get a micro SD card and you can run stuff off of a micro SD card, which is great because of course the Amiga 500 and 500 Plus don't have an IDE connection or anything like that. When you added hard drives previously, it was all done using a sidecar connection. I call it the sidecar connection, it's probably something else. But yeah, so that's one of my dilemmas. Do I continue to wait, as I have done, for the Vampire 500? I'm a little bit concerned about it because I've seen that one of the guys that's making the Vampire cards, Magister, he's actually selling the 500 and indeed 600 cards, I think, on eBay. And they're fetching ridiculous sums of money. I mean, £350 I saw one go for, which is way more than the Amiga ACA 1233N that I was umming and ahhing about buying back in February. So yeah, that's again why my dilemma comes in. Because I know if I'm patient enough and, you know, I want to hit my wallet hard enough, the Vampire will be an absolutely amazing thing to have for the Amiga 500 Plus. You can also get some more chip RAM for this as well that goes in the trapdoor. And I think that's the only thing you can do with the trapdoor is actually add RAM to this machine. So I'd want to add another megabyte because I've got the Fat Agnes chip that supports up to 2 megabytes of chip RAM, and I'd want to do that. But again, the dilemma is, do I wait for the Vampire so I can buy one and hit my wallet quite hard? Do I buy a RAM expansion to get this up to 2 megs of chip RAM and buy an ACA 500 Plus, because then that's a pretty neat system. Does mean I can't play AGA games though, but as you've seen, I've got an Amiga 1200, so yeah, not a big deal there. Okay, and lastly, the Amiga 600. So this one of the advantages it's got over the A500 Plus is that it's got an IDE header on it, so I could actually plug a compact flash to IDE device like I've got in my Amiga 1200. run a Workbench installation off that, have WHD load to load all the games. But at the present moment, I wouldn't be able to do that because the machine only has 1 megabyte chip RAM and I don't have any expansions in there, so I haven't got any additional RAM, any fast RAM to be able to use WHD load. There are solutions to that. There's the ACA 620 or 630 that you can buy. They're quite expensive and I think quite difficult to get hold of these days. There's also a card known as the Furia, which again runs on a 68020 CPU. Not too expensive, you can pick them up on eBay for about £80. And also additional RAM for the trapdoor, because again with the Amiga 600 you can only add trapdoor RAM into the trapdoor. You can't add expansions or accelerators in there. So I'd have to use a 1 meg expansion to bring this up to 2 meg, and then with an ACA or a Furia, which will also have RAM on its board, I'd then be able to use this with WHD load. But again, I'm in the same sort of boat because I would like a Vampire 600. So do I wait for the Vampire 600, which again is expensive and who knows if I can get one, or do I actually go ahead, buy the Furia, buy the RAM upgrade, buy an SD, not an SD, a compact flash to IDE, and just run it that way? Comments below, guys. Let me know what you think. What would you do if you were me in this situation? Thanks as ever for watching, and I'll catch you again soon.